Back in 2007, our Lifelong Kindergarten Research Group launched the Scratch coding platform and online community. In the past 20 years, more than 150 million young people around the world have used Scratch to create a wonderfully diverse collection of stories, games, animations, and other types of interactive projects. Overall, young people have created more than 1 billion projects with Scratch. A big reason for the success of Scratch is the online community, where young people can share their projects with one another. Scratchers, as members of the community are known, get inspiration by seeing and trying out projects created by others, and they can even remix the code in other people's projects to create their own variations. The online community also serves as a source of feedback, where Scratchers provide one another with comments, suggestions, encouragement on their projects. As they create and share projects, Scratchers not only develop computational skills, they also learn to think creatively, reason systematically, and work collaboratively, essential skills in today's society. Since Scratch has been around for almost 2 decades, there are now many former Scratchers at universities and companies around the world. A year ago, I got an email from one of those former Scratchers, Gwyn Chilcoat, known on Scratch as Hello Yo What's Up. Gwyn is currently a PhD student in Earth and Planetary Sciences at University of California with a passion for community-led conservation projects. She wrote to me that she wouldn't be doing her current work in community-engaged science without, in her words, Scratch giving me a place to use technology to build community when I was young. In her message last year, Gwyn mentioned that in college, she'd become friends with Foisy, who had also spent a lot of time creating Scratch projects while growing up, with Scratch username CrazyWeasel123. Sill's currently a PhD student in Earth and Environmental Sciences at Columbia University. I decided to invite Gwyn and Sill to the podcast to discuss how Scratch has influenced their work and their lives. At a time when many people are expressing concerns about screen time and about social interactions online, I think it's important to listen to Scratchers talk about their experiences creating and sharing with Scratch. We need to recognize there are many different ways for young people to engage with technology, some productive and creative, others problematic and distracting, and we shouldn't lump them all together. As you listen to Gwyn and Sill, I'd encourage you to reflect upon what types of technology experiences you would want for the young people in your life. Hey Gwyn, hi Sill. Welcome to the Lifelong Kindergarten podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. So excited to be here.
Great. Well, I know, each of you got started with Scratch probably when you were around 10 years old, which is like 15 years ago. So I know that's quite a while ago and you haven't been active in Scratch in recent years. But I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about how you feel those early experiences in Scratch have influenced your current work and your life. So maybe we'll start with you, Gwyn, or maybe I should call you Hello Yo What's Up, because that's how I knew you in the Scratch community.
Of course, yes, absolutely. So I think I, started using Scratch when I was maybe 9 or so, and at that point in my life, I found that I really loved organizing things and putting things together and bringing people together to have a complex project all work together. And that's something that has really carried through in my life through, taking on those leadership positions in high school and then getting into college, and now as a graduate student doing really community engaged work that works with a lot of researchers and scholars from around the world. I think that aspect of bringing people together and bringing ideas together has really been important and pivotal for me.
That's great. And how about you, Sill, or maybe I should say Crazy Weasel 123? Yeah.
I love it. So for me, I feel like I had a lot of collaboration with friends on Scratch projects actually in real life. So I have a lot of memories of sleepovers where, stay up all night coding some game. And if I was babysitting at the time, when I was little bit older, and when I was babysitting, I would, use Scratch as a way to engage with kids, and I was not that I was an adult, I'm 13, 14 years old, but it was a way to communicate in person, I think, through a different medium. You're working on a game together. You can be like, oh, we should do this, we should do that. As a researcher now, everything in research is hinges on good collaboration, and especially when you're working with these huge climate models that have so many different aspects to them. You need so many different experts that need to talk to each other about like the type of parameterizations they're using. You have to be connected to make sure that your work isn't impacting others in a way that's gonna not be productive or fun. Because I think it's fun at the end of the day. But yeah, anyways.
Well, it's really interesting hearing you talk about the importance of the community, because sometimes people, they hear about Scratch as a coding platform, and there's a lot of publicity in the last decade about learning to code and the value of learning to code. But I do think the community has been one of the most important and distinctive features of Scratch. Hearing you talk, it reminded me of a few years ago. I was just walking across the campus here at MIT, and I bumped into the chair of the physics department. And he stopped me and he said that his kids were using Scratch and he really appreciated that we created Scratch. And again, here at MIT, I thought he was going to say he was so glad that his kids were learning technical skills. But actually, that's not what he said. He said, what's great is it's really like being part of the scientific community. Here, scientists are always reading other people's papers and building what other people are doing. And in Scratch, it's the same things. My kids are learning that in order to do new things, you build on the work of others. So I really like that framework of thinking about that it's not just the technical skills, but really being part of a community.
Yeah, I love that. I think that start in Scratch has helped me now as a researcher. When I come up with a question and I look to see if somebody else has done work to, when I come up with a question and look to see if any work has been done on it, I think sometimes people's response has been like, oh man, like somebody had that idea already. Somebody already did that. And that means I can't write a paper about it. But I feel like probably partially due to those experiences with Scratch, tend to stay on the side of like, oh, awesome, somebody thought of that. That means it was like a cool idea and we can work with what they came up with and take it even further.
I love that perspective on things. Maybe now, I do want to turn the clock back now and to hear some more specifics about some of your early experiences with Scratch that you were building upon. So actually, maybe we can start with you this time. So think about either an early project or one of your favorite Scratch projects to give a sense of the type of work you were doing with Scratch, in those early days.
I saw all these games and I was like, this is so cool, and I was like, I want to try to make that. And so for my teens, early teens especially, I got really interested in making like platformer games. So like, having this little ball guy jump around and go through all these levels. And then I would see other people post like different variations of that. And it became kind of like a, cycle of inspiration, creation. And I would have projects that I started that took years. Like I started one video game idea and I came to a dead end. And then 2 years later, I picked it up and I ended up putting in like 5-10 hours a day for like a month or two. I'm a little crazy, you know what I mean? Anyways, and then I finished it up and I was like, let's go. But it was a very iterative process of like seeing other people do things and kind of push the field. And yeah, so yeah.
I really like that. A lot of times when people think of iteration, they just think about keep on working on your own thing. I really liked how you were sort of iterating along with others and going back and forth. How about you, Gwyn? Maybe can you share about some of your early projects? I seem to remember you did a lot of collective projects of different sorts, and maybe you can explain about those.
I did a lot of collective collaborative projects. One that stands out to me was, receiving perhaps the greatest honor a Scratcher can receive, having a featured project. And I had one featured project, and it was called Scratch's Sing-a-thon. And I was in choir in elementary school, and I was very, very bad at it, but I enjoyed it, and that's what's important. And I thought I did a lot of music collaborations on Scratch. I was trying to figure out how to do kind of audio editing so we could like layer tracks on top of each other. seldom worked. I really didn't understand what I was doing, but I enjoyed the idea of trying to put it together. And something I was really leaning into at this point was kind of understanding different folks' strengths and weaknesses and interests. And there was this concept of like an art trade that was common on Scratch. You know, I'll draw your character if you draw my character. And I would push for like trades of other things, like project trades. So what if I record you some music that you could use as background music and you draw my character, or kind of getting more creative with different sorts of trades. And so the idea with the sing-a-thon was that a singer would be paired with an artist. And so the singer would record themselves singing that song, and the artist would draw some cover art to go along with it. And there were dozens and dozens of these pairs that we made on the sing-a-thon. And it was just this like incredible exercise in project management for like an 11-year-old or however old I was at the time. And I remember like kind of pulling my hair out and being so stressed out. Like, this person hasn't responded to my messages. You can imagine doing a similar thing on in an office today, right? But I think that taught me a lot about like the trade-offs of responsibility, where like I loved having that autonomy and kind of shaping how the project would look, but the responsibility also stressed me out, and that like I felt that I owed it to these people to carry it through. But at the outcome, it was something that I was so proud of, and I think we all got to really enjoy.
I do think this, for me personally, this was one of the most surprising things for me with Scratch, is that I sort of had some sense, you know, we had designed Scratch to let kids do creative projects, and we knew kids have lots of creative ideas, and there'd be a wide range of diverse projects. But the diverse forms of collaboration is something that at least I wasn't aware of. It could be that I'm of a different generation. I didn't grow up with the internet, and I wasn't as attuned to it. But I was always just so amazed how, you know, Scratchers like you started to do things like offering their services, that I'll make a song for you if you do this, or being able to, you know, send out a call for, you know, entries for different things. So there's just such a wide range of new forms of collaboration that, you know, we had never expected, but just flourished in the Scratch community.
Yeah, I think doing that work is really how I learned that management or organization is a skill. And it's something that not everybody is good at, and it's something that I enjoyed and like had some skills in, and it could be more than just being like the bossy kid on the playground, right? There's a way you could actually hone those skills in, and use that to be like part of a team, you know, something that's greater than the parts it's made of.
I also like the fact that though the two of you both were really engaged in the community, you engaged in somewhat different ways. And that also makes me happy, because I think with Scratch, we wanted it to encourage people to learn all different sorts of things, and people who had different styles and different interests and different motivations all be able to do interesting things. Whether in some cases it sounds with Sil, you had some clear ideas of a type of project you wanted to do, but you sort of got feedback from others and iterated with it. Whereas, you know, Gwyn was saying it was much more like orchestrating others, and that's a different type of way of making use of the community. So maybe you could just say more about the different ways that people have made use of the community and the importance of that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can just say as an outsider to a lot of Gwen's work here, I'm kind of like blown away, you know, because like, I don't know, I feel like now having been put in a couple more leadership roles and you know, having had, you know, times where I've had to organize a group of people is hard, you know, it's really hard to keep track of everything going on if you have a big project. So, you know, the fact that Scratch provided all these opportunities for collaboration between users online, in addition to kind of like more my experience where it was like in-person collaboration.
I do think that obviously some people might say, well, there are clear advantages of doing certain things in person and with other people that you engage with. But maybe you could say a little bit about each of you growing up, or maybe start with you, Gwyn, about the ways in which being involved in the Scratch community might have been similar or different to experiences you had or you didn't have and wish you had in in-person communities, and what role the online community played, in growing up compared to other types of in-person communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we're Syl and I are both at kind of this interesting age where we were kind of coming of age with the internet and all of these online forums, and that certainly played a really large role in my kind of adolescence development. And I think having the community of Scratch in particular be like my main outlet for many of those years meant that my early interactions with the internet were ones that were really supportive, where I could ask all sorts of questions and get really detailed, thoughtful help from people who just like thought it was fun to help and weren't asking for anything in exchange. If I couldn't figure out how to code a project, I could put a call out, and somebody who really loved to code and solve problems would help me through it. One thing that Scratch gave me that I didn't have access to in person was, for one thing, just like the wealth of knowledge and the depth of knowledge that is offered by all sorts of people. Another, like I said, is kind of this judgment-free help that might be harder to find or different in person. Even if part of that is just associated with like maybe the shame of needing to ask for help, and that being, a hard thing to get over as a child. Having that screen in front of you kind of separating you makes it easier to ask for help. And I think through Scratch, I learned that was okay. And actually it was good, and good things came of asking for that sort of help.
Syl, I think you'd want to add to that.
For me personally, I don't think I use Scratch in a way that maybe Gwen, you use a little bit more of like communicating with people to collaborate, create things, and make these vast networks of projects from these art and music ideas. I think for me it was more of a way to express myself and share it and have people respond.
You referred to Scratch earlier as your first social media, and obviously in recent years there's been a lot of pushback against all the problems of social media and teens. So as you were teens or even preteens starting to use Scratch, but a lot of the criticisms that are now coming out, and some of them with a lot of legitimacy, of some of the, issues that arise of young people having certain anxieties, that grow out of their use of social media. But in what ways did you see Scratch in that same way, or how would you sort of see Scratch differently?
One of the most powerful things about my experiences with Scratch was that it was a place where I practiced publicly being bad at things. And saying bad is subjective, whatever, and that doesn't matter. But like things that were new to me, that I wanted to get better at, that I knew I was not at a certain level with, I put out there, and by and large got incredibly positive feedback, positive reinforcement from this lovely community. Like Syl said, like people leaving comments and getting noticed by the Scratch team or by people who you admire, and the fact that it was such a positive and supportive scaffolding of a community, I think made me feel like it was a lot more okay to put myself out there with something that wasn't totally polished.
To me, that seems really important, that you felt comfortable of putting something out that you weren't quite sure about. That's taking a risk. And I do think in some platforms and in some communities, that's a tough risk to take, because you get a negative reaction. So the fact that you founded a welcoming, inclusive community that made you comfortable, let you take the risks that, in my mind, are essential to developing a more creative approach and to develop skills. Yet you need that type of comfort to take risks.
Absolutely.
I might just add in too, like the fact that there's not images being shared on Scratch, as like the mainstream form of communication. I think
images of people, images of yourself.
Yeah, let me rephrase that. Yeah, images of people. Yeah, exactly. Or images that people take. I feel like it was much more of what people created, and it still is what people create. I don't know why I keep saying was. I still go on Scratch once a month to check my messages. I'm a lifelong Scratcher, but I feel like that's that might be where it really becomes a different type of social media. Maybe I use that term loosely, but it's like you're sharing your creative visions and responding to it by remixing or by looking inside other people's projects, seeing the code. It's like open source, I mean, that's science too, open source, that's what collaboration is. That's the best of science. So I guess the point is, like, it's not like you're sharing a post and trying to get validation based on something about your life. It's more about something external to your life that you created. I think that makes it a lot different.
Can I jump off that real quick?
Great.
I think what you're getting at there still underscores maybe how valuable it is that it's also a moderated community and how that makes it safer for kids. And I think through being on Scratch for many, many, many hours as an adolescent, that helped me practice building genuine connection with people without, sharing personally identifiable information, and without sharing unnecessary details. It helped me find other ways to connect and build real relationships, in a framework where that was safe to do, and that's such an important skill in the digital age.
Actually, maybe I'll follow up on that, Gwyn. One project that you did later in your Scratch career that was really inspirational for me was during COVID, where you hadn't used Scratch in a few years. I think but you came back to Scratch and did a project called Acts of COVID Kindness. And I remember that really caught my attention. Could you tell a little bit about the story about why you came back to do the project on Acts of COVID Kindness?
Absolutely. During the worst of quarantine and kind of spring, summer 2020, I was, as was everybody, feeling very, very isolated and feeling a need to connect. And so at home, that looked like, volunteering on political campaigns, writing letters to my neighbors and trying to figure out contact-free ways to bake foods for my friends that we could, drop off to one another. But I was just so desperate for this connection and to put some good into the world. And so in this project, I essentially orchestrated this matching scheme where folks could nominate somebody who they thought could maybe use some cheer, and then others could volunteer to create some sort of gift. And I would match them together. I would give somebody an assignment, say this person likes dolphins and jazz. Maybe work with that. And the person giving the gift would anonymously create something, and I would kind of facilitate giving it to the recipient. And it was unbelievably low tech. There's probably one line of code that's press space to go to the next page. So it's not a coding project. But I think that's an example of going to Scratch for that community and connection and sense of just wanting to do good, and not ask for anything in return.
Yeah. Well, you wrote about that project. You said, I've always been incredibly grateful for the community here that supported me in so many creative endeavors. And that's why you want to come back to the community. It drew you back to the community at a time where people needed some cheering up.
Absolutely.
And I do think it's projects like that that have also influenced us. We've always emphasized the importance of Scratch and helping kids develop as creative thinkers and to express themselves creatively. And of course, that's important. Now we talk about the importance of helping kids develop as creative, curious, caring, and collaborative learners. So I do think that caring side, in my mind, has been really important to the success of the Scratch community. But we weren't explicit about it in the beginning, but from the way you're both talking, that to have supportive environment it was, the fact that it was both providing a caring environment that you felt comfortable with, but hopefully also helped you develop an attitude towards collaboration that had that type of spirit to it.
Yeah, I feel like, for example, if the projects weren't remixable, then it would have completely shut off a lot of the things that I thought were the coolest parts of my Scratch experience, which were getting to see what other people did and and getting to build off that.
But then also, I do think, and this comes out partly to the moderated nature of the community, with remixing, sometimes people get a project remixed on Scratch and they say, that person stole my ideas, and it requires some discussion about, no, on Scratch, everything, you can build on other people's ideas, but you have to give acknowledgement. So it's helping people learn to be part of a sort of a caring member of a community, and you should be generous to others, but also have an expectation that you're going to be able to build on what other people have done. One of the things that's nice is every year there's a whole new generation of 10-year-olds who come in and start using it. Although this current generation of 10-year-olds is a little bit different, and they're entering a different environment than when you were starting to use Scratch about 15 years ago or whatever. And also in some places that there's, because of some of the challenges, with the uses of, digital technologies by youth and, teens and earlier years, places there are these no screen campaigns of saying that you should keep kids away from screens. But if we kept kids away from screens, you might not have had those Scratch experiences. Maybe just say about how do you think about it when you hear about people pushing for having a no screens campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I can start quick. I think, it's a bummer, I think, because I think a lot of the bad rep for screens comes from an obsessive nature of the idea of someone spending all their time on a screen and consuming and not engaging, and then losing out from the real world experience. I guess maybe that's one argument. I think separating out the types of screen time, and specifically maybe it's bad for my eyes. I mean, my eyes were probably going to be cooked anyways by the time I'm 25. Anyways, I feel like there's different ways that I felt after using screens. If I'm working on a Scratch project, 10 hours go by, I didn't even notice it. And also I've been thinking really critically for so long about it and working a lot of muscles in my brain, right? Whereas if I was, if I spend a whole day passively consuming something or playing a game or something, it's a different type of screen. So I think it's separating out the types of, just if there's different types of non-screen time quality of life, I think it's a more complicated story. Maybe that's what I would say to that.
Yeah, I couldn't put it any better. I totally agree. I think it's so difficult because there is so much about so many of the things that we use on screens that are built to be addictive. And they are, and they work. And, I'm not a psychologist, and I don't know what the best way to work with children's very malleable brains is. But I do know that this is something that was really beneficial to me as a child, and I think has, carried through my life with those benefits.
Another thing that's different in kids' lives these days is the presence of AI tools, of artificial intelligence tools. I wonder what your thoughts are about, if those tools have been available when you were growing up, how that might have affected you, and how it related to you. How does that relate to the type of experiences that you had with Scratch and the Scratch community?
This is what makes me feel really old. Because I just know in 10 years, maybe less than that from now, we'll be looking at it and as something that has always existed. And, the generation that comes after us won't be able to imagine a time before AI. And that's so different from our experience. I think, and my opinions are also influenced, now as an educator, as somebody who teaches in college classes now. My concern is about the importance of frustration. And I think something I learned on Scratch was I would encounter a problem and I'd get really frustrated by it. And sometimes I would storm away from the computer. Sometimes I would kind of smash at the keyboard. Sometimes I would go onto a forum and try to ask for help. And sometimes I would chip away at it until I figured it out or figured out a workaround so I could get around that problem. And just the way it felt to solve those problems, that hit of like, I did it, I made it work, I fixed the problem, and now I'm getting this code to do the thing that I wanted it to do, is so powerful. And that's my favorite part about coding now. I spent all day yesterday just trying to like make some nice figures, and just every time something went wrong and I changed something and I ran the line again and it worked and it came out with this beautiful plot. Oh, it's just the best feeling in the world. And so I guess I wonder what the experience would be like with less of that frustration. I think what's so cool about Scratch is that, I would go to Scratch and want to retell a chapter of my favorite book, and Sil would go to Scratch and want to make a platformer. And as a means to the end, we had to encounter that frustration and we had to use those problem-solving skills. And if you take away that necessity, then you're not going to build those skills along the way. You'll build different skills, and maybe that's an entirely different conversation.
No, I think it's really thoughtful that at different stages of where you're at, it might be appropriate to be doing different sorts of things. It did occur to me, one of the phrases I've always loved that I'd learned from the Lego company, where we've done a lot of collaboration, they talk about supporting the joy of building and the pride of creation. And when I hear the two of you telling your stories about your experiences with Scratch, even though the Lego company was talking about that in terms of building physical things with Lego bricks, it does seem to me that you experienced the joy of building and the pride of creation and benefited from that. And then from when I hear you talk about AI, I think you're sort of saying you would hope that you wouldn't have lost out on that joy of building and pride of creation.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe we can now turn it to wrap up from your current self as graduate students who have passed through a lot of different educational stages. If you now want to give advice for today's 10-year-olds, advice about the way they should both engage with technology, or just some general advice about how they could best prepare for the lives ahead of them. I know that's a big ask, but what type of advice would you give to today's 10-year-olds?
Yeah, I'm happy to say a few words on that. I got some strong feelings, I mean, I think I owe most of my success to my parents being extremely encouraging about having time to be bored. I think I owe so much to that. I had time when I was bored as a kid, and when I was bored, that's when I had a lot of my coolest project ideas and like a lot of my most creative moments. So I would say, if you can, as much as it's painful to do it, unplug from all the chaos and just sit down and organically have some time to be bored. I think that makes all the difference. Also, I'll use this as a shout out to give to my parents. My mom's a musician. She actually wrote a song, Crazy Weasel 123, after me. She's a fiddle player. So I had to give her a shout out about that on this podcast. But I mean, really, that's what I think is at risk here above all, is just being bored, because when you're bored, that's when you can truly interact with the world and be present and come up with some cool ideas. But I'm biased, but I'll that's my hot take. I'll run with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think advice that I'd give to a 10-year-old, but also advice that I frequently give to college students, is to do do the things that make you excited. I think especially so many like high achieving intellectual kids can feel so much pressure to be like a doctor or a lawyer and fit in particular boxes and just go through the motions of checking off achievements that they feel like they should do, that's kind of imposed externally. And when you stumble across something that you think is really cool, dig into that and go a layer deeper and see what comes of it. Have the courage to kind of take a little bit of a jump and explore a little bit. And I think especially when you're 10, trying less to find some particular destination and more just to see where your mind takes you and be curious and open-minded and follow the things that get you excited. Follow them a little deeper, see where they lead. I think it's a great way to look at the world.
I think it's a great point to end at. As you said, I think that's great advice, not just for 10-year-olds, but for all of us. So anyway, thanks so much again to both Gwyn, hello, yo, what's up? And Sil, Crazy Weasel 123. It's been great to talk with you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was so much fun. I'm honored.
Great. Okay. Bye-bye. The Lifelong Kindergarten podcast is produced by Mitchell Resnick and Eric Schelling in the Lifelong Kindergarten Research Group at the MIT Media Lab. You can find other episodes, additional resources, and online conversation in our Substack at bit.ly/LLK podcast.